Football might be over until August, but as Josh Pate always says, we don't subscribe to the word off-season around here at the Raw Prospect Football Podcast. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back in to another episode of the Raw Prospect Football Podcast. I'm your host, Michael Wein, and I'm joined by my extravagant and fantastic co-host, Mr. Emmy Nixon, from Austin, Texas. We are recording this on Tuesday, February 25th, 7 p.m. Central Time here in the state of Texas, the year of our Lord, 2025. However, if you are listening to this, you'll probably be hearing it on either Wednesday, February the 26th, or Thursday, February the 27th. Today, we have a loaded show. We're going to react to more of Todd McShay's Mock Draft 1.0. We're going to dive into some gut check on a variety of topics, including this upcoming week's NFL Combine. Workouts start on Thursday and run through Sunday for all of these prospects. And then we'll also get into some Texas football and college football. So hope you guys enjoy our content. We just put up a new episode of Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. I've gotten some great feedback from some peers on that. So you'll likely have, if not a weekly episode of that, you're going to have bi-weekly content leading up all the way through spring football, through the draft, at the very least. So to all our listeners out there, to all our viewers out there, we thank you very much. If you would just hit the like and subscribe button on our videos, it helps the algorithm. Emmy Nixon, I welcome in my co-host tonight. How are you on this fine Tuesday evening?
I'm good, man. Another day, and it feels like my hairline went back a little bit each and every day. But, you know, despite that, feeling good. I watched a lot of film today, and we'll get into what I watched film on a little bit later. But I'm excited for some of the segments we have planned today.
Two personal anecdotes before we get into football that nobody listening to this probably gives a shit about, but I'll share anyways. The past couple days, like this weekend, I looked around my apartment and there were all these little like gnats flying around and like little flies or mosquitoes. I don't know what exactly they are. And I've seen some like a couple like small spiders on my baseboards. In like corners and stuff, and so I'm like, oh shit, I don't like bugs. Like, I'm okay with mosquitoes, I'm okay with flies, but most bugs, I don't do that. You know what I mean? Like, like roaches and shit, that's not for me. So I went on Amazon and I got some indoor pest control for like $20, and I've been spraying this shit on my baseboards ever since I got home from work today, and I've already killed like probably 75% of the creatures in here. It's probably the best $20 I've spent since the calendar turned 2025. But regardless, that's all from that standpoint. That's just a little personal anecdote you might find funny. But if you ever dealing with bugs or creatures in your apartment, go on Amazon and buy some of this pest spray, and I'm telling you, you can knock that shit out in a matter of minutes. Anyway, let's jump into the football for today. Do you want to start with our mock draft reaction from Todd McShay, or do you want to go gut check first?
Let's go gut check first. I've got a lot of stuff planned for that. Go ahead and ask me your first question.
All right. This is Texas related. I asked you an Adonai Mitchell question last week. Go check that episode out if you haven't already. But this has to do with our guy and former Outland Trophy winner from 2 years ago, T'Vondre Sweat. How would you grade overall T'Vondre Sweat's rookie season? And do you think he has all-pro potential?
Simple, man. It's an A for me, man. And to put it in perspective, just how good his rookie season was, I've got a couple of stats prepared here. The Titans gave up 4.2 yards per carry with Sweat in the game. And that counts for every single run play, even the runs that are just like outside runs and have nothing to do with him. 4.2 yards per carry. That's seventh. That would be seventh lowest in the NFL for an entire season. With him out of the game, they gave up 4.9 yards per carry, which would be second highest in the NFL. So I think that stat just kind of encapsulates the impact this dude has on the game. And the questions that we had, or that really everybody that covered him had going into the draft and going into his, NFL career, was just, can he be a 3-down player? And I think he answered that with a resounding yes this season. He played 66.2% of snaps, defensive snaps this season, and that was above Quinnen Williams. That was a few spots below Vita Vea and Deron Payne, some of the top guys at his position. And I think that shows that he's already on his way to being a 3-down player. He had 23 pressures this season. I went back and watched all of them. And his ability to push the pocket consistently was on full display. And he had a breakout game in Week 11. And from Week 11 onward, his pass rush rate steadily went up. He had a 19.2% pass rush win rate in Week 11 against the Vikings, his breakout game. And that was top 5 in the NFL for that week. And then after that game, he averaged 10% pressure rate, not pass rush win rate, pressure rate, which, if you don't know, pressure rate, if you're around 10%, you're pretty damn good as a defensive lineman, especially at defensive tackle. So really good rookie season from him. I think, on an unrelated note, T'Vondre Sweat being in the fold for this Titans team makes me all the more excited for them to possibly add in Abdul Carter, because if you have that type of speed coming off the edge and T'Vondre Sweat pushing the pocket, as along with Harold Landry, that's a formidable defensive line.
Oh, yeah. The Titans have a very formidable defensive front, partially because of T'Vondre Sweat. There's a reason the guy won the Outland Trophy winner. He was playing next to Byron Murphy, but the guy is a monster run stuffer. We already knew that coming into last year, coming into his rookie season. And, he showed flashes of being able to actually get after the passer a bit at Texas. And what you like to see out of a rookie is improvement from week 1 to week 17. Improvement from week 1 to middle of the season. And he got better. And I think he could continue getting better. The big question with T'Vondre Sweat coming into this year and coming into the draft process last year, do you remember what it was? It was his weight. Because we heard that in that college football playoff game for the 2023 season against Washington, he may have been playing up to like 370, 380. That's what people inside the program at Texas heard. And so the concern going into, pre-draft workouts and the combine was his weight, and could he keep his weight at a reasonable place? Looks like he's done that. And as long as he, keeps his body well kept, I guess, I think he's got all the potential in the world to be like an all-pro, 1 technique, 2 technique, wherever you want to put him. I mean, he's got it all. And he's a character. Like, if you've never listened to T'Vondre Sweat do a presser, I highly recommend it.
Yeah, he's a funny guy for sure. And I think in terms of answering your second part of the question, in terms of is he an all-pro, I think the question really is, he's already on track to being a Vita Vea type of player, just a all-league type of run stuffer. But the question to me will just be, will he be Vita Vea, or will he be, a step above that, like who's that D tackle that played for the Bucs back in the day? Won
Warren
Super Bowl
Sapp?
and, like,
Was
yeah,
it Warren Sapp?
will it be Warren Sapp? But that's a crazy, high
Yeah, you're
guy to
getting
compare him
Warren
to.
Sapp
But you
is
get what I'm saying. Yeah.
Warren Sapp is an NFL Hall of Famer. So at that
Yeah.
point, you're getting into really coveted territory. But can he be Vita Vea? I mean, yeah, absolutely. And when I think about Vita Vea, I don't know if he's ever been an All-Pro. Can't recall that off the top of my
Yeah.
head. But when you think of Vita Vea, you think about one of the best interior, defensive linemen in the NFL. At least that's what I think about. So,
Yeah.
can he be that? Yeah.
Yeah, and that's what I mean is, like, the question will all rely on whether he gets that pass rushing ability up. So I think that's enough for that question. I'll go ahead and ask you my first question for you. So last week, I believe, or it may have been 2 weeks ago, Josh Pate on Josh Pate College Football Show, highly recommended. We quote him all the time on this show, as you already know. Ranked his top 12 programs in college football. His criteria was a 4-year rolling blend of on-field results, talent acquisition / development, program resources, and stability. So, using his criteria, what is your list, and where do you differ from his list?
Well, to be clear, I didn't actually do an entire list because that would have taken a long time to provide that answer. But I will tell you, it's coming one of these weeks on Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports. But I can't tell you his list, and I should have pulled up the graphic, but didn't think about it prior to the podcast, so sorry about that. His list, really fast: Georgia number 1, Ohio State number 2, Michigan number 3. That all makes sense, right? I think I agree with that part. I mean, all 3 of those programs have won national championships in the last 5 years. The on-field winning with all 3 of those programs, even though Michigan took a slight step back this year, their recruiting has picked back up, and I believe that Sharon Moore is going to put that program in position to be right back at the top of the Big Ten with some of the recruiting that he's done for the 2025 cycle, and just the overall makeup of that program has always been super solid. They have a rock-solid foundation and culture there. They've got the resources, it seems like, with Dave Portnoy really kind of outwardly providing support to their NIL program. They've got all the donors. They've got the stability, I think, now after Sharon Moore's first year. I agree with those top 3. I mean, Georgia speaks for itself. They won back-to-back national championships. In the past 2 years, even though they haven't won a national championship, they've gone 13-1 and 11-3. In the 11-3, with a loss in the quarterfinal of the college football playoff, was like the worst we've seen Georgia in half a decade at the very least. And then Ohio State, they keep on losing to Michigan, but they won a national championship this year. So I agree with that top 3. What I really wanted to discuss for this question is where Texas ranks. But before I do that, I want to give you the rest of the list. Texas is number 4, right behind those 3 programs. Then you have Alabama, Oregon, Notre Dame, which I think is a really interesting part of the list, that 5 through 7. I think you could maybe flip Notre Dame and Oregon, just because Notre Dame made it to the national championship this last year. I think Marcus Freeman is a top 5 coach in college football. We've already discussed that on this show. The recruiting isn't quite as good as Oregon. It's harder to recruit at Notre Dame than it is Oregon. And Oregon has a ton of resources. And I think both programs have stability. Where I understand it from Pate's perspective is Oregon They had the on-field success and the recruiting's probably better. But Notre Dame, they're winning, and they just made the national championship. So I think that could be flip-flopped. But other than that, man, you look at these programs, Alabama, 37 draft picks in the last 4 years. Oregon, 20 draft picks over the last 4 years. And Notre Dame, 21 draft picks over the last 4 years. Those Oregon and Notre Dame, pretty even, Steven. And then you have Tennessee, which I think is in a good place. Penn State, again, I think that sounds about right at number 9. And then the last three are interesting: LSU, Clemson, and Ole Miss. But I think what Texas at number 4 tells you is just how far we've come. The interesting thing about Texas is the on-field results the past 2 years have been awesome. They're the only program in the country to make it to back-to-back national semifinals the past 2 years. The previous 2 years, though, weren't so hot when it comes to on-the-field results. 8-5 and 5-7. That's where they're a tier below Georgia, Ohio State, and Michigan. That's where all these programs are a tier below those three. Because none of these others, aside from Alabama back in Nick Saban's heyday, have won national championships recently. And aside from LSU, that one Joe Burrow year. But where Texas takes the cake at number 4 is, I believe, and Josh Pate believes, that currently Texas is the best talent acquisition program in the entire country at acquiring talent both through recruiting and through the portal. Texas has done about as good of a job, if not a better job, than any of these programs. Ohio State's pretty damn good, and Georgia, like, those are the two programs that can really compete with Texas. But they're coming off a number 1 class. They generally, I think, make pretty good evaluations, have made pretty good evaluations the past couple years in the portal. They've hit on, I'd say, 75-80% of their portal additions the past couple years.
Yeah.
Which has played a large part in them having success on the field. And they have 4 consecutive top 5 recruiting classes. And all the resources in the world. They match resources with just about anyone in the country. And the most impressive thing about Texas, you could argue, this is the last thing I'll say, is even though there's been some turnover with the assistant coaching staff, right? Terry Joseph leaves for the Saints job. Blake Gideon leaves for the Georgia Tech defensive coordinator job. They're losing some position coaches, right? I mean, Tashard Choice goes to the Lions. Think about what Sark has been able to do. He's been able to keep the continuity between himself and his coordinators. Pete Kwiatkowski has been here all 4 years. One of the best defensive coordinators in the country. They've kept him around. That's a lot of continuity in that defensive room. Kyle Flood, the offensive line coach and co-offensive coordinator. Because we know who the real offensive coordinator is. But he's been around all 4 years. And then Jeff Banks, the special teams coach. He's been around all 4 years. It's really hard in this day and age of college football to keep your coordinators around for this long. And that's really impressive. The stability on this coaching staff, for the most part, has been really impressive under Sark. So, overall, I agree with Josh Pate's list for the most part. I think you could probably flip-flop a couple programs, but overall, I thought it was a really good list.
Yeah. I mean, on first hearing that list from you, because I actually had missed that episode.
It actually just happened this past Sunday, so you can go listen to his rankings.
Yeah, I'll definitely give that a listen. But on first listen from you, I hear LSU at 11, and I immediately think, like, wow, like, as an LSU fan, I'm pissed off. And not because I think they're too low, just because it just feels like LSU should be in a much better spot than what they are.
Yep.
They should be a much better program than what they are, based on the recruiting hotbed that they're in, the just amount of recruits they bring in every year. Like the recruiting, like despite what you think of the coaches they've had, the recruiting's been good. But the on-field results have just not been there. So LSU is the one where I wouldn't be surprised in a few years they're in that group that you mentioned. There's a lot of debate over that 5 to 8 group.
Yep.
That's the group I expect LSU to be in the near future.
I think that's a very good point. Last couple things I'll say. LSU at 10, Clemson at 11. That's interesting. But I understand it. You want to know why? They're pretty even in terms of on-field results. Even though Clemson has more conference championships in that time, they do play in a much easier conference. The on-field results overall, though, are pretty even. Over the last 4 years, LSU is 35-18. Clemson's 40-14. Where LSU separates a little bit is developing guys and putting them in the league over the last 4 years. 29 draft picks still. Over the last 4 years for LSU, only 19 for Clemson. So, in terms of recruiting, they recruit at a little higher level, and they're developing guys at a little higher level. But those two, I think you can make an argument for Clemson to surpass them, maybe. And then I think the Tennessee at number 8, Penn State at number 9 conversation, you could have an argument to flip-flop Penn State over Tennessee, because Penn State has far more often, I think, including this year, just like been in the Big Ten championship game, and also they won a couple playoff games this past year. So I don't know. Tennessee probably recruits a little better, but both of those programs are top 15 recruiting programs. So it's an interesting argument that could take the whole podcast. We won't talk about it much more. Let me ask you my second question of the night. NFL Combines this week. Simple question here, and I'll give my thoughts too. Which position group, or you can mention, I'll give you 2 position groups. You can throw up 2 if you want. Which position group or groups are you most interested in watching this week at the NFL Combine? Which position groups will you actually sit down and watch the Combine for an extended period of time? Are there any of those, the ones you're most interested to watch this week?
For sure. Yeah, I'm really interested in this running back class, honestly.
That was going to be my answer.
This year's running back class is really impressive. And honestly, the kid at Ohio State, Quinshon Judkins, I think he's sneakily a guy that could run in the low 4.4s and might have some really crazy time in terms of 3-cone, and all of a sudden we're looking at him as a fringe first-round pick. There's a lot of running backs that I could see sneaking into the top 40 picks, really. So
it's a really
running
good
back
year
for
to
sure.
need a running back. It's an awesome year to need a running back in the draft.
Oh, yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah. Second one, defensive line. And I would just say edge and D-tackle, I guess kind of cheating there, but I think it's just with the guys at the top, you have so many dudes that were linebackers and then switched to defensive end, just this year, and we only have 1 year of sample size on them. So a lot of their prospect profiles is going to be projecting because they only have 1 year of experience at edge. So they're still learning the position. They're still, in theory, getting better with every snap they take, essentially. So seeing their testing numbers and comparing them with guys in the past is going to be a huge way that these teams are going to be able to evaluate. So for a guy like Jalen Walker, I mean, even Abdul Carter too. I mean, Abdul Carter I still think is going to go top 3 regardless. But there's a lot of room to move up and down for a lot of these guys.
For me, the 2 most interesting days are Thursday and Saturday for sure. That takes nothing away from, I think it's defensive backs and linebackers on Friday. And then it's offensive line on Sunday, I believe. But Thursday with these freaks at edge, especially at the top of the draft, think about a guy like Shemar Stewart, who I really want to see test, who has all the physical tools in the world. And I'll talk about him possibly a little later when we talk about Todd McShay's mock. And then the defensive line group. Like, what does a guy like Walter Nolan look like at the combine? How does he test? A guy like Deion Walker, who at the very start of this process was originally projected to be one of the top defensive linemen off the board out of Kentucky, but now he's kind of fallen off a little bit, and I just am curious as to why. Some of the tape has been very inconsistent. He doesn't necessarily play with great pad leverage, but those things are interesting to me. And then the running back class is loaded. I mean, when a guy like Omarion Hampton is like almost the consensus number 2 back, in almost any other running back draft, that guy's the number 1 back in the class, in my opinion.
Yeah, no question.
And that just speaks to, not only do we have one of the best running back prospects I think we've seen in a long, long time in Ashton Jeanty, but the depth is just insane. I think you could find an NFL starting running back in like the 4th round of this draft. It's nuts.
Yeah. I mean, have you seen that kid out of Kansas?
Yeah. Devin
I mean, he's
awesome.
There's a chance he doesn't even go till day 3, and he's a good back.
Yeah. One of the things I'm going to do later this week or tonight, once we're done with this, I'm going to go watch TFG's running back rankings that he just put out. Because I am very interested in this running back class the more I dive into it. All right. Good answers there. I 100% agree with you. You can ask me your next question.
Yeah, before we move on, though, like, not to go on too big of a tangent here. We'll keep this short, but like, how do you consume the combine? For me personally, I'm a combine highlight watcher. Like, give me the, compilation of all the 40 times from Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Thursday, like whatever. Like, the compilations, like that's me right there.
I'm
call me a casual, but
typically Thursday and Friday, I'll scroll Twitter. I'll see the highlights of the 40 times. I'll scroll social media. I'll see the highlights of the 40 times. On all my Texas accounts that I'll follow, I'll see Alfred Collins and if he does anything wild, right? I'll see, I don't know, whoever else, Andrew Makuba on Friday, right? I mean, which is a guy I think has a chance to make some noise this week if we're just talking Texas-related prospects.
Yeah.
On Saturday, if there's nothing else outside of college basketball that's going to be on, and we'll talk about Rodney Terry at some point. Good God. Anyways, I will probably have it on just because I want to see Quinn throw. I want to see Jaden Blue run. I want to see not only like Isaiah Bond and Matthew Golden, who I think are all going to work out in on-field drills, but I'll have it on in the background. I might not sit there and watch it start to finish, but I'll have it on the weekend.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I'll do it, I think, for this year, especially since there are so many Texas Longhorns at the Combine this year, 14.
Yeah, no, that's valid. Yeah, homework while you're, or just any kind of work while you're have the Combine in the background. That's a good combo for sure. All right, next question for you. Let's see here. Sorry, it's loading. Okay, next question for you. What specific traits do you want in a replacement for Najee Harris? And are there any specific running backs in this draft that fit the best with those traits?
Well, to make the answer to this question shorter, I'm just going to tell you the back that I think fits perfectly. And the traits will speak for themselves. The traits will answer the second question. I think the Steelers need a running back who's going to fit Arthur Smith's vision in this outside zone running scheme that he wants to run. Which, I love myself some Najee Harris. Don't get me wrong. I think that guy could go to another team and probably end up having like a really good rest of his NFL career. In fact, each of the 4 years he was with the Steelers, he rushed for 1,000 yards. I think he's the only back in the league to do that. And it wouldn't maybe seem that way at points in times over the last couple of years when you've watched the Steelers play, especially along their offensive line where they've had young, developing players that have struggled at times, especially in this running scheme. So I love myself some Najee Harris, but I just don't think he's the best fit for this run scheme. I don't think he's the best complement to a guy like Jaylen Warren. And also, as much as I love myself some Jaylen Warren, I don't know that I want him to be my 1A back. I'm definitely okay with him being my 1B, but I feel like you can find better to be kind of your workhorse. Can you guess the guy that I'm gonna mention here in a minute or in a second? Do you have any guesses for the guy that I'm?
I
right here.
My hunch is that you really like the kid out of Iowa.
Yep.
Yeah,
I do. And here's why. I just feel like the Steelers, as well as I kind of know them, and Arthur Smith, who's still the offensive coordinator for year number 2, I think they're going to look at this kid's tape, who I've started to watch a lot of, and he might think in his mind, like, man, what could I do with a 6'1", 6'2", 225 back that possesses kind of the ideal build for what I think a lot of these teams are looking for in a lead running back that had 23 touchdowns, that had all the production in the world, right? And that excelled and ran outside zone after outside zone after outside zone after outside zone at Iowa. That's basically all they ran in the run game. With a guy with that size and like his one-cut ability, his outstanding vision, the ability to press the line of scrimmage and set up his blocks, is he going to be Derrick Henry? No, but I think he could. I could see Arthur Smith kind of looking at him and then kind of saying like, man, I want another big back that knows how to run outside zone, that has the vision, that has the size and the explosiveness, that is a capable receiver. I haven't watched much of Caleb Johnson out of Iowa in the pass game. Haven't gotten that far down the road yet. But I think you'll be fine there because Jaylen Warren can do it. And if you're worried about Caleb Johnson from a pass protection standpoint, you have maybe one of the best, if not the best, pass protecting back in football in Jaylen Warren. I think Caleb Johnson and Jaylen Warren together would just complement each other very well just because of Johnson's size, his ability to run outside zone, the enormous amount of explosive runs that he broke off this past year. He was mostly a check down option in the receiving game, but you could use something like that. That's always something the Steelers have coveted in their offense. You think about a Le'Veon Bell, think about even a Najee Harris. I mean, he was kind of a check down at points in times. Despite not a ton of exposure in pass pro, I mean, you have Jaylen Warren for that. You have backs for different uses. So that's kind of the back. There's a couple others that I look at. I think Travion Henderson in later rounds could be interesting. And then Hampton I would be fine with because I just think he's an all-around scheme versatile back. But Caleb Johnson, I want to keep that guy in the black and yellow because I just think it looks right. But that's kind of my early evaluation. I'm pretty sure he's going to test at the combine. I want to see him. That'll be a guy I'm keeping my eye on the rest of this draft process.
Yeah, And he's a guy that I think the 10-yard split time might be kind of important because you look at him and it takes him a little bit to get going, kind of in a Derrick Henry type of way. And I hate that I keep saying that name because it puts in perspective the fact that Derrick Henry is plays at 250 pounds, and then we're talking about a big back that's 225. So it's like I don't want to keep saying I don't want to keep throwing out Derrick Henry's name, but kind of in that way, he takes a little bit to get going, get to full speed. So that 10-yard split, I think, is going to be important for him. I think the Steelers might target Omarion Hampton, actually. I think Hampton –
I can see it.
I think he's a little bit more polished in terms of pass catching. And I think if they want a 3-down back, that's probably who they would go to. Because I'm pretty sure Warren's a restricted free agent, right?
Yeah, he is, but I don't have any worry that he won't be back. My only other concern with Johnson is he's not a very twitchy back that can string like a bunch of moves together in the open field. He's kind of more of a one move and then keep going kind of guy. So if the Steelers are looking for like a more twitchy back with the ability to make moves in the open field, Hampton probably is because he's just a better, I think, all-around back. But I'll talk about possibly later whether or not I think that would be a good pick for them in round 1. Just a little tease there. All right. I'm up with my last gut check question here. Ooh, this is an interesting one. Shadeur Sanders is not going to throw this week or participate in on-field drills at the Combine. What is your opinion on his decision? And just in general, what is your opinion like overall on top prospects not participating at the Combine?
Man, I think it's lame, man. I there's a reason why I wanted to kind of discuss this on tonight's show, and I think obviously the Combine, it's not meant for fans. It's meant to show off these prospects. It's not, an all-star showcase or anything. But it's a lot more fun for us fans when the top prospects are out there throwing, And I would understand it for, say, like a consensus number 1 pick, no doubter, like Trevor Lawrence, for example, to not throw at the Combine. But Shadeur Sanders, who I think has some to gain in a Combine-like setting, because I think his best ability is the fact that he's extremely accurate. I think his ball placement is his best trait as a quarterback. So I didn't really understand the decision from that standpoint. I think he most likely would have thrived in that scenario. So I didn't really get it.
Yeah, I'm really kind of indifferent on it. I think you can flip on the tape and see those kinds of things from Shadeur Sanders. And I think you're going to see that at his pro day. The one thing I kind of question is like, well, why are you not throwing? Like, what is the reasoning behind it? Is it just like you want to be in the comfortability of throwing to your receivers at your pro day, and you don't maybe want to look bad at the Combine? Because if it's being, my only real issue with it is because I think either way, Sanders and Ward are pretty locked into the first round. Just because it's such a weak quarterback class, I think both those guys are probably going in the first round. It just seems that way from everything that I've heard and from all the mock drafts so far this draft process. That's the way it looks like it's going to go. But if it's like, I can understand it from an Abdul Carter who is coming off a real injury in the college football playoff. His agent has already come out and said, like, we have this injury. We're gonna work out at his pro day, but we're not gonna, I guess, risk anything at the combine. I can understand that. If you have a medical reasoning behind it, I can understand that. I'm a little wishy-washy on guys that just come out and say, I'm not going to work out at the combine. Because I just don't see the point. Like, just go and do it. Maybe it's easier said than done from our perspective, but I don't know.
Yeah. And it's like, that's a great point. Yeah, that it's so easy to say, like, oh, like, don't you want to just, like, go out and compete?
Yeah.
But, like, that's kind of, it's hard to just straight up say that from our standpoint where we're sitting at because we're not out there doing it. So maybe I'm too harsh, and I don't hate Shadeur Sanders. Like I really don't think it'll matter in the long run, really at all. But it's just I don't know. I don't really get the thought process behind it, as you mentioned. So I think we'll leave it at that. Now we'll get into our last question of the night. This is one that I'm actually really, really excited to hear your answer on. It's on Arch Manning, of course, the chosen one, as some would call him. What will be the identity of the Texas offense with Arch Manning as QB1? What do you think will change the most compared to last season?
Well, the hope is for Texas fans that the short yardage approach changes the most. In that they're going to use Manning's legs a little more in that situation. Maybe they're not running tush pushes out there, but QB sneaks, I mean, they could definitely use that. They need to use his legs in short yardage and goal line situations. I do not think Sark is going to come out here and use Arch Manning like one of these other mobile running quarterbacks that we've seen the past couple of years. They did not recruit Arch Manning to come out and run the ball 10 to 15 times per game.
Yeah, no.
I do think you're going to see him used way more, though, in read options and things like that, especially short yardage and goal line, than Quinn Ewers. Because Quinn Ewers just wasn't that. Arch Manning has the athleticism to do that. But I think the overall identity of the passing game is going to be a downfield passing attack to open up the run. Just because I don't think I'm typically an optimist, right? On the Texas football side of things. I try to be as optimistic as I can as a Texas football fan. But replacing 4 starters on the offensive line with Nato at left guard and Cole Hudson at center, along with a freshman at right tackle currently, unless they go out and address something in the portal after spring football. I don't know how much I actually believe in the offensive line in the run game yet. To add to that, you have C.J. Baxter's uncertainty with his health. And then you have a lot of young guys behind Trey Wisner, who's really like your only experienced workhorse back.
Yeah.
That you have in this running back room right now. I don't know that it's going to... I know Sark, in his mind, wants it to be a run-first, pass-second offense. That's always how it's been at Texas. But I think we're going to see, especially right out of the gates, I think with Arch's ability to use these weapons downfield, Ryan Wingos of the world, DeAndre Moore, I think we're going to see a vertical passing attack to open up more of the running game, if that makes sense. That's just my gut feeling right now in February.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the deep passing attack is the main thing for me. I think from watching a bit of Arch Manning, especially in the Mississippi State game, it's very eye-opening just to see like how aggressive of a downfield passer he is. He's gonna go out there and sling it, man. That's what we know about Arch Manning. He's not gonna be conservative with the football. Let's just say that. He believes in his arm, and he believes he can make any throw on the field, for better or for worse. And I think, of course, it'll be overall for the better. He's talented enough to do those things. So that's the main thing. I think it's just a mindset change at the quarterback position, if anything, because I think Quinn, a lot of times if there was a open receiver short, he was going to take that throw every single time. And I love Quinn for that. But this will be a complete shift where Arch is out there hunting for that big play, which it'll be a nice change for sure, but it'll come with its own problems.
Yes, and the last comment I'll make is, for Texas fans, you're just gonna have to live with some interceptions that are gonna come with the risk taking downfield.
Yeah.
But in the bigger picture, I promise you, it's going to pay off. I promise you.
Yeah, and I can already see it, man. Like him throwing, 5 picks in the first 2 or 3 games, and people being like, "Oh, the sky is falling," blah blah blah. Manning's a fraud, blah blah blah, and it's just, oh man, like I don't.
That's the thing, fan. We're not going to go on a big tangent right now.
Yeah,
but that's the thing that college football fans, not just Texas fans, are not ready for. Every move Arch Manning makes as the Texas football quarterback is going to be scrutinized and talked about as much as about any other athlete in the world. Like, he's going to be the number 1 headline on ESPN, good or bad. If he throws 3 picks or if he throws 5 touchdowns and 500 yards, like, that's going to be one of the lead headlines on SportsCenter. It just is, because that's what comes with his last name. That's what comes with his family lineage. That's what comes with playing quarterback with this on your chest.
Yeah, and I think to put it in perspective, like, Bronny James made headlines, and his team wasn't even relevant. What do you think would have happened if Bronny James was on a national championship contender, and was good?
Yeah.
Sorry to throw shade at Bronny James, but you get my point. Like,
even if Texas takes a step back next year, say they go 9-3 and they miss the playoff, he's still going to be the most talked about story in college football, I promise you. But let's move on to the latter half of the show. Let's go ahead and rapid fire react to. We each chose 3 intriguing selections from Todd McShay's mock draft 1.0, which is paywall protected, but we are going to react to 3 selections each. And so you can start us off. Let's go rapid fire, 1 to 2 minutes per pick. And so you can start us off at number 5 with the Jacksonville Jaguars. Tell us who they picked and what your reaction is to the pick.
Yeah, Jacksonville goes with Tyler Warren, tight end out of Penn State. We've talked about him a bit already on the channel, and I'm sure if you're listening to this podcast, you already know who Tyler Warren is, so I'm not going to get into all that. But the fit for the Jaguars, I think, it's pretty simple. You pair him with Brian Thomas Jr., and you raise the floor of this offense. I think with Trevor Lawrence, you want to give him as many targets as possible and give him kind of a safety blanket to kind of relieve pressure in some of these key third downs where it just kind of feels like he's grasping for straws sometimes. We saw some really shocking turnovers from him last year, and I think Tyler Warren will be an immediate, big target that has a huge catch radius that's just going to give Trevor Lawrence the ability to just, he's down there somewhere, I'm going to throw it to him, and he's going to have 2 of those options now rather than just one with him and Brian Thomas Jr.
Yeah, and a couple things I'll add to that before I get to my first selection that I'm going to react to. Number 1, Evan Ingram, I think, is going to be a cap casualty this offseason, so they do need a tight end. They have a need at that position, and he can help in their run game as well. He's an effective, willing blocker. I think he's a very well-rounded overall player. And to move the way he does at his size, I'm guessing that guy weighs 260. I mean, he's a big dude, 250, 260. To move that in the way he does down the field, definitely worth, I think, a top 10 pick for sure. My first one, we hinted at this earlier, is the Pittsburgh Steelers at number 21. Going with Omarion Hampton, running back out of North Carolina. Another running back in the first round. This wouldn't be the first time this half-decade that the Steelers have drafted a running back in the first round. Last, of course, being Najee Harris. My only knock on this pick is I don't know that with as deep as this running back class is, I don't know that I'm okay with the Steelers drafting a running back in the first round. Maybe I'll come around to it eventually. But I just, as a Steelers fan, I view so many other holes that they could fill in the first round. I don't know that I want a running back in the first round. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know that I want to do that again. Even as good as Omarion Hampton is. But
No, you're 100% right. Yeah.
But the player itself, like, I would 100% be on board. I think Hampton's scheme versatile. I think he could be an upgrade over Najee Harris, believe it or not. He's a downhill runner who brings he's a very powerful runner. He's got the ability to create yards after contact. I believe in his career at North Carolina, he created something like, he was really good in terms of creating yards after contact, right? Powerful in his lower body, something I think Arthur Smith typically covets in his running backs. The Steelers have always been fond of those kind of guys. I think just in terms of overall talent, he could definitely be an upgrade. The inflection of talent from Omarion Hampton at this running back position for Pittsburgh, I would be totally on board with. I just have a hesitation drafting him at 21. If you traded back to the end of the first round or the start of the second round and you took Omarion Hampton, I'm all in. But they definitely need a running back. I think the Steelers need a running back in the first 3 rounds. And I think they're going to take one because this running back class is just too good.
Yeah. When you compare Hampton in the first round to, say, a guy like Cam Scatterbo in the third, it really puts things in perspective. It's like what is the term? It's a business term. Opportunity cost. There it is. Yep. Opportunity cost of taking Hampton in the first round versus a position of more value in the first round is just too great, in my opinion.
Yep, and there you go. That's the value of listening to our podcast. We can mush economics and football and put them together. That's what we do here.
Yep. Didn't think that would be on the bingo card today, but here we are. There we go. All right, another first-round running back for my Cowboys, Ashton Jeanty going at number 12 in this mock draft. I've seen this a lot.
Yep.
And here's my thing. I'm right there with you on the running backs thing, and even more so since this is a top 12 selection. This is a year where the Cowboys need to reset both lines. We have 6 picks in this draft. We're missing a 4th-round pick from the absolutely disgusting Jonathan Mingo trade, by the way. This is one where I think the Cowboys should consider trading out of the first round altogether. And I wouldn't typically say that, but I think this is a year where the Cowboys just need to replenish as much depth on this roster as possible. We are too damn top-heavy to be taking a running back in the top 12 of a draft. It's not where this team is at right now. We've said this before. You don't want to be adding an elite running back to a team without the running game to support that back. If we had a great offensive line, this would be different, but we don't. Mm-hmm. So Zach Martin is retiring. Our right tackle is making $20 million a year, and he's just okay. Tyler Guyton was benched multiple times last year at left tackle. This is offensive line or defensive line, or trade down. That's it to me.
I agree. You have to build your team up the middle first. And for the Cowboys, the most important thing right now to eventually compete with the top teams in the NFC, the Lions, the Eagles, whoever it might be, whenever the Cowboys get there. I don't know when that will be. If you're not built well up front, the running back, the receivers, the cornerbacks, the safeties, the quarterback, not going to really matter when vying for like high-level playoff contention and Super Bowls, things of that nature. So, yeah, I agree with you there. Got to build the team. When you're going through like a mini retool or a rebuild, I don't know what you want to call it for the Cowboys, you gotta start there. And I hope like that's where the Steelers also are trying to go, even though they've heavily invested already in their offensive line. I think they need to do more of the same this year, but on the defensive line. Anyway, my next pick. Sorry, I'm just tracking the Texas baseball game. They're playing the Incarnate Word tonight, and they are winning, but it's a 1-0 game. So we'll keep an eye on that. Baltimore, my divisional rival, taking Azareye'h Thomas, the cornerback out of Florida State, at the number 27 pick. And I know the Ravens have gone heavy on secondary past couple of drafts, and they had their struggles this past year in the back end of their defense. It got better towards the end of the season, but they did have their fair share of struggles. They drafted a really talented player, Nate Wiggins, who I believe suffered an injury, so that didn't help them. Marlon Humphrey's been injury prone. He's getting, I believe, kind of up there in age. He's not young anymore, at least. I love Kyle Hamilton, of course. I wouldn't honestly be mad at this. Like, continue to draft long, athletic, press corners to really try to build a really awesome and talented back into your defense. I believe in Zach Orr and what he showed towards the back end of this year as their new defensive coordinator. I think some of the adjustments and the way that Baltimore defense played down the stretch was admirable. But big plays, big plays, big plays. The Ravens defense allowed 58 total completions of 20 or more yards this year, third most in the NFL. Even though you have a Nate Wiggins, even though you have a Marlon Humphrey, if you can get Azareye'h Thomas, who I think with a good week of testing could definitely sneak into the back end of the first round with all of his physical tools. I thought he was one of the best defensive backs at the Senior Bowl, which I think helped his case. I think he's one of the more underrated overall defensive backs in this class. I don't know that people noticed him a lot, though, because Florida State kind of went into the dumpster this year.
Yeah.
But go watch this kid's tape. He's really impressive. I think it would be a big boost for their secondary unit.
Yeah, I'm a fan of it. Marlon Humphrey's getting up there in age. And, Nate Wiggins had a good year, but had an injury-riddled year. So filling in that secondary with more talented pieces is never a bad option. I just think defensive line would have been where I would have gone personally, but corner is never a bad option.
Yeah, you can go a bunch of places, but I'm just reacting to this. If they were to make this pick, I wouldn't have any problem with it. But
yeah.
All right, let's go to our last selections. You go ahead with number 19, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. What did they do in this mock?
Yeah, so they went with Jihaad Campbell out of Alabama, the linebacker. This one in particular, this is one where you look to replace their, perennial All-Pro 35-year-old at linebacker, who I cannot think of his name for the life of me at the moment for some reason. I'm blanking here.
I'll look it up.
My goodness. Anyways, they look to replace that linebacker. He's a free agent this year. That, I think, is a good way to go. You look at the way the Eagles built their team, they constantly look to fill in, potential future holes ahead of time. And I think the Bucs would be doing that here because they're gonna look back. They're gonna look to bring back Levante David. That's his name. They're gonna look to bring him back regardless. So having both of them and having David possibly help develop their contingency plan, I think that's a good move by them.
Yeah, I would agree. Lastly, number 28, one pick after the Ravens. Mr. McShay has the Detroit Lions selecting Shemar Stewart, the edge out of Texas A&M. This caught my eye. And by the way, go listen to Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, the episode that just dropped today, if you want to hear more picks, specifically 3 Texas Longhorns that went in this mock draft. But on Shemar Stewart, and I always get confused. Shemar Stewart, Shemar Turner. Shemar Stewart both played at A&M, but Shemar Stewart. The Lions' defense at the start of next year should definitely be better than what we saw at the end of this year because all the injuries that happened, a lot of it was bad luck. Some of it just couldn't be avoided at the end of the day. It was unfortunate for them. So I think it will be better next year. But there are places they can improve. Even with a fully healthy Zadarius Smith and an Aiden Hutchinson set to return next year, I still think there's room to improve this pass rush. I do. And it doesn't ever hurt to have depth at that position. So even if he's not going to come in and start right away, which you'd actually probably prefer, like you prefer him to be a contributor. If you're drafting a guy in round 1, you want him to contribute sooner rather than later and make an impact. He's not going to be a speed rusher, but he's 6'5", 280, 285. I really want to see like what his measurables are at the combine and how he tests. So I think he's just a freak athlete. Bruce Feldman has him near the top of his annual freaks list on The Athletic, which I read earlier this week. The thing I love about Stewart is his arms. The wingspan is just insane. 34 and a quarter, 34 and a half inch arms. He's got an insane amount of torque, torso flexibility. I think if scouts are going to be scared off potentially a little bit by Shemar Stewart, it's going to be kind of his lack of production over the course of 3 years at A&M. Only 4.5 sacks at the end of the day in his career at A&M. That's a little red flag to me. I can't remember a guy as talented as him that had like as little production as he did at the college level. But I think it'd be worth taking a chance on, especially if he really tests well at the combine. They need, I think, more oomph to their pass rush because I know the injuries hurt last year, but they could still use more there. So I don't hate it, but you could probably look in other places too. He's one of the guys, in my opinion, that could rise and potentially go like top 20, or maybe fall even a little bit if he doesn't maybe test as well as people think. He's a really polarizing prospect, in my opinion.
Yeah, 34.5-inch arms, to put that in perspective, that's longer than most tackles in the NFL. So the threshold for teams to draft a guy at tackle is usually 33 inches for wingspan. So 34 and a half is pretty insane. So the measurables and I mean hopefully the combine numbers match. I mean, this pick could end up being, not even being available by the time next Sunday comes around with how he might test.
Yeah, I would for sure agree with that. Okay, last part of our podcast tonight. I didn't really prep for this, but we can have an interesting conversation to close things out. Biggest riser and biggest faller. Do you have two names in mind for each of those categories for this week's combine? Are there names that stand out for a guy that could really shoot up draft boards and a guy that maybe will fall a little bit?
Well, Will Johnson is my first name. I think right now he's slated to go top 15-ish, and I think by the time this weekend is over, I think he'll be a consensus top 8 type of pick. His tape speaks for itself. Really, all that's left to be said is what is his 40 time? That's it. If his 40 time is lower than, if it's lower than like 4.5, like 4.48 ish, then book it. He's top 8 pick.
Yeah. What about a potential guy that might fall a little bit? Do you have any names in mind for that? Or not really?
Yeah, that's tougher. I think.
It is tough. One of the names I was going to throw out for a potential riser is going to be kind of an underrated guy in my opinion. Azareye'h, tight end out of Miami. He's actually not going to test this week due to an injury, I believe, but he's got top 5 tight end, I think, in this draft written all over him. I think he could have risen some with a good week at the combine. In terms of Texas prospects, let's put it this way to close it out. Which guy do you think has the most to gain at the combine this week? Is it Quinn Ewers or is it Andrew Makuba? Could it be a guy like Jaden Blue who opted out of the Shrine Bowl? Where do you kind of see that? Which Texas prospect has the most to prove this week?
To me, it's got to be Quinn Ewers. I think right now his stock has dropped lower than I think anyone would have thought it ever could have before the season. So right now, it's just, show off the talent that you got, dude. That's really all there is to it. And you can say what you want about, pocket presence or all there is or anything like that, but at the end of the day, he can fucking spin the football, and that's all you got to do at the combine. So,
yeah, I think that's a good answer. One of the things I'll say on Quinn is with Cam Ward, I think I heard rumors that Cam Ward might not throw. With the top, either one or both of the top quarterbacks in this class not throwing at the combine, you can make an argument that out of all the guys that are going to be on the field throwing, Quinn Ewers has the best arm talent. He'll have the best arm talent on the field Saturday. You can make that argument. If a guy like one of these other guys at the top maybe doesn't throw. He, as good as he's looked on air throughout his career, and it's funny because we all know who is putting this out at this particular moment in time, but there was a story that came out this morning, I'm assuming from his agent, that said he played pretty much the entire year with not just a strained oblique, but a torn oblique. I'm not either choosing to believe or deny that story. I don't know. But it is kind of convenient, right? it is the week of the combine. You want to try to, put out the best, portray the best image of yourself and try to improve your stock. That's what this week is for. He has been working, though, with a couple quarterbacks coaches. I think he's put on some weight. I think he's been working with Mike McCarthy, some other, NFL coaches and NFL quarterback coaches, whatever. I think if he goes out and he spins that football and it looks really good, I'm not saying he's going to shoot up draft boards or anything, but could he make himself a round 3 pick with this weakness of the quarterback class? Like, it's not impossible. Because what I've heard is he's kind of dropped to like a round 4, day 3 guy. So we're past the point of talking about can Quinn get himself into round 1 consideration. We're past that point. But is it impossible that he could really show off at the combine, go to his pro day, look good, medicals test out well, and he's a day 3 pick somehow? I mean, I don't think that's impossible. So that's my thing on Quinn. Yeah. But I will be watching that. When he's throwing, I will be watching very closely. All right, parting shot. And we're going to start coming up with a parting shot for the end of almost every episode, and we're going to both react to the parting shot to close things out. This one is a doozy. Parting shot, and it has nothing to do with football. You got all your football. If you don't want to listen to this, fine, don't. But parting shot, buy or sell. Fire Rodney Terry into the burning hot sun if you're Texas.
Can I put my entire mortgage on it? Can I what let's it's a stronger word than buy. Let me cop that. I mean, come on. This everything that we've heard our athletic director say about what he wants Texas athletics to be. I mean, how can you not?
It's put your life savings on it, put your entire life savings into it, put your mortgage into it, put your 401k into it.
Yeah.
There's only one right answer here. And look, I like Rodney Terry. I like Rodney Terry, the person. I'm sure he's a great guy. I've only heard nothing but great things about him. He's very good with the fans. I think he's good with the media. And to be clear, I think he could make it as a coach somewhere else. Texas isn't for him, though. And look, I understand why Texas had to make the hire when they did. It was circumstantial, right? What he did with that team after the fiasco with Chris Beard, fantastic. And I think the only way the only way he can salvage it is if somehow this season miraculously turns around in the last 4 games, they get into the tournament, and they somehow make the Sweet 16. They got to beat NC State from last year. They have to legitimately, I think, make a deep run in the tournament. He's got to get to the second weekend. I think that's the only way he can kind of salvage this and work his way out. I think this past Saturday, the South Carolina game was kind of his Abilene Christian moment. Remember when Shaka Smart in his last year at Texas lost to Abilene Christian?
Yeah.
In the first round of the tournament? That wasn't necessarily a must-win game for Texas on Saturday for their tournament hopes, because they still have 4 games left, 2 of which are quad 1 opportunities. And I think if they go 2-2 with a win in the SEC tournament, or if they go 3-1, I think they'll still get in. But my goodness, that was a game you really hated to lose. and lose in the fashion that you did to a team that hadn't won a game in conference play, like, just come on. This team, at the end of the day, and look, you got to give him credit for getting Trey Johnson, but at the end of the day, he's the guy responsible for the misfit toys on this roster and the roster construction. And I just don't think it's working out. Texas needs you made the best point of all. They want to be, the expectation at the University of Texas is we're going to kick ass in every single sport. We don't care what it is.
And for the most part, they do.
For the most part, they're doing that.
Yeah.
Chris Del Conte has done a Hall of Fame level job turning around a bunch of the programs here at Texas. I mean, and he's a pretty quick mover too. Like David Pierce, not winning enough. He was winning, but he wasn't winning enough.
No. See ya.
Bye. We'll go get the guy that was in the national championship game, right?
Yep. Go play Barton Creek, bud.
Yeah. Go play some more Barton Creek, bud. Bud. But, I mean, look, last point here. I mean, look at women's sports. Like, what school in the country is kicking ass in women's sports the way Texas is? Softball, ranked number 1. Women's basketball, ranked number 1. Women's tennis, ranked number 11. And that's, like, the worst of all the women's sports. They're ranked number 11 in the country. And that's, like, by far the worst of all the women's sports. Women's swimming and diving just won the SEC championship. Women's golf is top 6 in the country.
Yeah.
On the men's side, football team, awesome. Baseball team, top 15. They look like they're going to stay that way for at least the foreseeable future. Like, everywhere you look, it's just like, whoa, Texas is really kicking ass. But the men's basketball program just can't. If you're the University of Texas, you have to make the tournament. There's just no excuse with the resources that you have to not make the NCAA tournament. That's got to be the minimum bar.
Yeah.
And it looks like things just aren't. There's no momentum here. Like, you're losing Trey Johnson. You're losing your best player to the lottery. And after Tremont Mark, Arthur Kaluma, and a bunch of the other fifth-year seniors you recruited leave because they're out of eligibility, you're going to have to do the same thing over again next year. And who's to tell me that Rodney Terry is going to build some amazing team out of the porter next year? Because he just hasn't done it. He hasn't proven to me that he can. So you got to move off. I'm sure maybe I hope for the best for Rodney Terry's future, not wishing any ill will on him as a human being, but as the basketball coach at the University of Texas, it's just time to pull the plug on that.
Yeah, I rooted for him all the way, man. Like, I really wanted him to succeed. It just hasn't worked.
Yep. All right. Anything else before we get out of here for tonight?
Well, I'm ready to feel pain. Is all I'm going to say. I'm, as y'all know, I'm a Mavericks fan.
Oh God.
And something is going to happen tonight.
Yep.
Something is going to happen, and I'm not going to like it.
I don't know if you saw the Jordan ad that was making the rounds on Twitter. The new Jordan ad with Luka.
No, I didn't.
I can send it to you. I don't know if you want to watch it though.
Oh boy.
That being released the day of this game is something else. I don't know. But yes, you're right. Something, and probably many somethings, are going to go down tonight. Where's the game? Is it in LA or Dallas?
In LA.
It's in LA, okay.
And in Dallas on April 10th.
That'll be... Which one do you think is more interesting? His return to Dallas?
Definitely the one in Dallas.
Yeah, I would agree.
That's going to be... Oh, my God. Dallas has a reputation of being, like, kind of, like, more chilled out than some other fan bases, but you will never see American Airlines Center more fucking crazy than that day. Like, my God.
I'd have security at every corner of that building on April 10th.
And tonight, like, Nico Harrison better stay the fuck out of sight, honestly. Like, if Luka spots him in the crowd, like, we're fucked. Like, we're already fucked, but, like, we're, like, really, really fucked if he sees him in the crowd. Like, please don't show up to this game, Nico, please.
So by the time you're listening to this, you already know the result and what happened in the game. But yeah, that's certainly I think maybe the biggest storyline in sports today is that game. So
yeah.
All right, guys. Well, we'll see you next week. Again, go check out Deep in the Heart of Longhorn Sports, the episode that just dropped today, where we reacted to more of Todd McShay's mock draft. Emmy and I have started kind of a new schedule where we're recording them way in advance and then releasing them the week after we record them. So I've been getting really good feedback on those episodes, so those will continue to come, if not every week, every other week, up until, again, spring football and through the combine. We're recording another one here this week that will be up early next week. So we're on a good schedule here, and we're making some good improvements, I think, behind the scenes to the podcast. So if you choose to subscribe and like our videos, we greatly appreciate it. And if you have friends that love football, maybe they're not nerds like we are, but just want, an hour of football talk every week, they can definitely come here, because we consider ourselves, if not experts, we think we're pretty reasonable here at the Raw Prospect Podcast.
Yeah, we kind of sort of know what we're talking about. Come on.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
At least we like to think so. Even if you don't think so, make us feel good.
Yeah.
It doesn't cost you anything. Like and subscribe. Even if you want to hate. I don't really give a shit.
Yeah. Just leave a comment talking about how much you think my hairline is, like, looking horrible today. Like,
yeah, or make a comment about how much of a pussy you think I am for not liking spiders. Anyway, that's going to do it, y'all. Be on the lookout for more content. Have a great rest of your week, and enjoy the NFL Scouting Combine. We'll be back next week with our full reactions to everything that went down. But until next week, peace out.
R.I.P. to the Spiders.
Yeah, lots of spiders dying today.